In this tutorial, we're going to continue to look at culture, how we can understand it and how we interpret it. How do we learn all the different behaviors that are regarded as right and wrong in our society? This process, known as enculturation or cultural conditioning, is something that is universal to all cultures. In every culture, people must learn to function together effectively in order to survive and to seek to live a comfortable, profitable existence together. People develop rules for functioning together. Some of these rules are universal and others vary from culture to culture. These rules of behavior are passed on from generation to generation so that people learn or acquire them throughout their lives. There are many specific behaviors that people learn or acquire, and they vary greatly from group to group. We noted in the last tutorial that behavior is always linked to an underlying value or belief. So when people are learning cultural behaviors, they are also learning and internalizing the values and beliefs behind those behaviors. When you understand how those processes work, you can then understand how two people from different cultures can behave in radically different ways and both be completely convinced they are right. This can be one of the most helpful things to learn if you intend to live and work effectively in another culture. Enculturation happens mostly during early childhood, but adults also can continue to culturally condition as they learn new behaviors or refine existing behaviors throughout their life. There are differences between adult and childhood cultural conditioning. During childhood, infants and young children learn the basic activities of life such as eating, walking, talking, dressing, bathing, etc. But during adulthood, people learn new, more complex behaviors or new ways to perform already conditioned behaviors. For example, an adult might learn to eat with chopsticks rather than with a knife and fork. Or they might learn to be less direct in the way they communicate in certain situations. Though the steps are the same in each case, one difference in adult enculturation, especially when an adult moves from one culture to a new culture, is that it often requires unlearning or unacquiring behavior that was already acquired during childhood conditioning. This process for adults can take longer and can be more difficult. Here are 5 steps that have been identified in the process of cultural conditioning. Number 1, observation and instruction. At this stage, you're only beginning to become aware of a particular behavior, but have not yet tried to do it yourself. For example, eating with chopsticks, you may have watched people doing it, or someone may have told you how to do it. Number 2, imitation. Now you actually try to carry out the activity. You sit down at a table and begin eating with chopsticks, or you try to. At this stage, it's awkward for you, and you're trying not to make mistakes. You may have difficulty concentrating on anything else because all your attention is focused on eating. Number 3 is reinforcement. As you eat, people encourage you when you do it right and correct you when you are wrong. You have a chance to put into practice what they tell you and you try to improve. You'll also be picking up on some of the associated values with this behavior, such as how important it is for people to see that you learn to eat properly. Number 4, internalization. Without needing much reinforcement, over time and with practice, you now know how to eat with chopsticks. You will still have to pay attention to what you're doing, but not as much as during stages 2 and 3. You begin to feel like you fit in better in social situations that involve eating, and the attention isn't so much on learning this skill. Number 5 is spontaneous manifestation. Now you're able to eat in the right way, without paying any conscious attention to what you're doing. It comes naturally. As you eat, you're aware of other things, not the act of eating specifically. You have expressed some of your personal values to your local friends, that it is important for you to become a real part of the new community, that you want to learn, that you enjoy and respect their culture. We all observe reality. We see things as they are, but then our minds interpret what our eyes see and give it meaning. The mind of a person from one culture is going to be different in many ways from the mind of a person from another culture. So their interpretation of what they are seeing, the meaning that they derive from the same reality, is going to be different. This is one of the most fundamental problems of cross-cultural work. The fact that two people look upon the same reality, the same example of behavior, and see two entirely different things. So any behavior in a cross-cultural situation should be interpreted in two ways. First, the meaning given to it by the person who does the action, and second, the meaning given to it by the person who observes the action. When these two meanings are the same, then we can say that cross-cultural communication has been successful. Because the meaning that was intended by the doer is the one that was understood by the observer. This, of course, also applies for spoken communication cross-culturally. But we will talk about that a little bit more later. For now, we will just think about behaviors. To help you think about the real-life implications of what we have been discussing, here are a few examples of cultural differences in the interpretation of the same behaviors. You've probably come into contact with people of other cultures and may have experienced some cultural misunderstandings yourself. These examples are all from real situations that are commonly experienced in a variety of cultures around the world. We can see here first the behavior where two young women are at an airport information desk. They looked away and didn't smile or answer my polite inquiry for directions. The interpretation there is, for some reason, they have decided to be rude. Maybe there's something about me they don't like. What did I do wrong? The intended meaning was they didn't speak any English, so they were trying to manage an awkward situation. They wanted to save face for everyone. In the second example here, we see a puppy runs up to you, trying to be friendly, and you're sitting in a village. The people there start yelling and throwing stones at it until it runs away. The interpretation might be, how could they be so cruel? We would never treat dogs that way. The intended meaning was that the local dogs have rabies and other diseases, so our hosts were protecting us. Another example would be, a meeting is arranged for a certain time, but two local men were over an hour late. When they arrived, they said they had been visiting someone else first. The interpretation might be, we felt let down, that they had been disrespectful of our meeting. We wondered if they felt negatively about our relationship in some way or were trying to show us that. But the intended meaning is they do not have the same view of time as us. The personal relationship with other people had to be preserved, and everyone understands that sometimes you are just late. It isn't a big deal and doesn't mean anything.